In this lesson, we're going to talk about file structure. So the reason file structure is important, so if you're making a website and you've got a bunch of content in there, so you've got some CSS, you've got some JavaScript, maybe you have some fonts, you have some images, you want to be able to place them in separate folders so you don't over clutter your root section. You don't want to have all the files within this root area, because if you did, it's going to be a lot harder when you look at the files once the website grows, in order to be able to differentiate, to see what is part of the files that you need for certain things. So here we've got it basically broken down into CSS. So we've got our CSS files that are going to sit in there. We've got our images that are going to sit in there. In here we're going to sit our JavaScript, and then here we're going to have our basic folders that are going to sit in the root of it. So it's important to have a clear logical structure to the navigation of the files. So these are all the files that are available for this website, and as we can see here, right at the root here, we've got the index, and then this is the page that's actually getting shown. So when I go to localhost, I can see that this is the page that's going to load. It's this index page here that's loading. And this is also going to become important when it comes to search engines, so that they can better understand which files you deem are more important. So let's say you had a website with 100 pages, and if you've got them all on the root here, they're going to be all deemed to be equally as important. But if you only have a few of the main files here that are going to navigate to additional folders within your files, that's going to allow the search engines to understand and more easily crawl that content and understand what you consider important. So anything on the root is going to be the most important, and anything that's held within folders is not as important. And again, ideally you want the search engines to be able to understand the navigation of your site and be able to optimize search results returned for your content. You don't want to be diluting the important elements of your website. So if you've got 5 pages that are really important, you don't want to dilute those compared to the other files that you have. So always a good idea to keep that file structure separate, much like what we're looking at here within Bootstrap. The reason for keeping CSS, JavaScript, fonts, and images separate is in order for readability, and then keeping the regular HTML files separate. Again, you want to have readability and as well for search engines. An additional folder where you had something like portfolio. So we could create something like that if we had a client portfolio or client testimonials, which might not be as important for search engines to index it. But again, they're going to be able to read that this folder is called portfolio, and they're going to be able to index your site accordingly. So all the content contained in portfolio, has to do with this main folder name, and that's going to allow you to have it more readable as well as better indexed via search engines. And again, this comes into a naming structure, so you don't want to generally have things where you have a file name, and now these aren't user-friendly URLs, because this doesn't really say a lot about what this result is going to be. So if you did have a portfolio, and if you did have a file named, so you could have something about your portfolio. So if you had a bunch of images that you've taken from a certain location, so you could maybe do the location name like that, and then have images, so image 1, or you could do Toronto -image for the actual image names, so on. You could continue to build out those that smart URLs there in order for them to be a lot more readable, and as well when you go into the files, that you don't just have a whole bunch of files and you're not really sure how they relate to your website.